The moment everything broke didn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It came quietly, right there at the dinner table, when my mother set her fork down, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and said, "You'll need to find somewhere else to live." Just like that. No warning, no discussion, no pause to see if I'd understood. I remember the clink of silverware still echoing in the kitchen of our split-level house in suburban Ohio. The same kitchen where I'd eaten dinner for years. The same oak table with a scratch near my seat from when I was a teenager. My father kept his eyes glued to his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. My younger sister smirked. My older brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already checked out. My mom cleared her throat. "We sold the house," she said, calm as if she were reading a grocery list. "We're moving. You're not coming with us." I was 68 years old. 68. Not a teenager freeloading in a basement. Not someone who'd never worked a day in her life. I'd spent decades punching a clock, paying my share, keeping the peace. And there I was, being told I had 30 days to disappear. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to laugh, to say this was a joke. My father finally spoke, but not to defend me. "You've had plenty of time to prepare for independence," he muttered, still staring at his meatloaf. Independence. From the house I helped pay taxes on. From the place I'd maintained while they went on cruises and weekend getaways. My mother didn't raise her voice. That was her specialty. Control without volume. "We assume you'll figure it out," she said. "You always do." That sentence stuck. "You'll figure it out." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Do you need help?" Just an assumption that I'd quietly absorb the blow and clean up the mess like I always had. I didn't cry. Not then. I nodded, stood up, and took my plate to the sink. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. I went upstairs to the room I'd slept in for over 30 years and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to their laughter drift up through the vents. They were already talking about new neighborhoods, lower property taxes, and how fresh the move would feel. The next morning, they were gone. Suitcases loaded, garage empty, family photos stripped off the walls. The house felt hollow, like it had exhaled and never breathed back in. 6 months later, my phone buzzed while I was sitting in the same living room drinking coffee from a chipped mug. A text from my mother. "Why are you still there?" I laughed. A slow, quiet laugh. Because that was the moment I realized they still had no idea what they'd actually done. Before I tell you how this happened, tap like and comment where you're listening from if family ever pushed you out. To understand how things reached that point, you need to know this didn't start at that dinner table. It started years earlier, quietly, the way most family fractures do. From the outside, we looked like a typical Midwestern family. Church on Sundays, cookouts on Memorial Day, a flag on the porch every 4th of July. Neighbors waved, Christmas cards went out on time. On paper, everything looked solid. Inside the house, there was an unspoken ranking system. My mother decided what mattered. My father avoided conflict like it was contagious. My siblings learned early how to stay in her good graces. I learned how to stay invisible. I worked steady jobs. Factory work at first. Then administrative work. Nothing flashy. I paid my share of utilities, bought groceries, fixed what broke. When the washing machine rattled, I handled it. When the lawn needed mowing, I did it. I didn't ask for praise because I knew better. By my 40s, I was the dependable one. The fallback plan. The quiet safety net no one acknowledged because it was always there. The small twist came 2 months before that dinner. One night, scrolling listings online on my old Dell laptop, half asleep, I recognized something familiar. The hardwood floors, the bay window, the crack in the driveway shaped like a lightning bolt. Our house. Listed. Professionally staged. For sale. No one had said a word to me. That was the first time I didn't feel hurt. I felt alert. Clear-headed. Like someone had finally told me the truth without realizing it. They weren't planning with me. They were planning around me. And instead of confronting them, instead of arguing or begging for answers, I did something I'd never done before. I stayed quiet. And I made a phone call. That decision, made alone, late at night, with the hum of the refrigerator in the background, was the moment the story stopped being about abandonment and started becoming something else entirely. I didn't sleep much that night after I found the listing. Not because I was panicking, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. The house was quiet the way it always was after midnight. The furnace kicked on every so often. A car passed on the road outside every few minutes. Everything felt normal. That's what made it unsettling. I sat at the small desk in my bedroom, the same one I'd had since the early 1990s, and stared at the photos on the screen. New throw pillows, neutral paint, lamps I'd never seen before. It was like I'd been edited out of my own life. I could have confronted my parents the next morning, demanded answers, asked why no one thought to tell me. That would have been the old pattern. Me upset, them defensive, nothing changing. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a real estate attorney a coworker once recommended. His office was in Columbus, about an hour and a half away. I left a voicemail. Calm, direct. Asked about my options. The next day at work, while the copier jammed and someone microwaved fish in the break room, my phone rang. We talked during my lunch break. I explained the situation. I lived there. I paid expenses. The house was listed without my knowledge. He paused, then asked a question that changed everything. Do you want to stay? No one had ever asked me that. Not once. Yes, I said, and I meant it. From that point on, things moved quietly but fast. Paperwork, meetings, numbers discussed in neutral tones. Nothing dramatic, just facts. The house wasn't as expensive as people assumed. Suburban Ohio prices weren't Manhattan prices. My savings weren't enormous, but they were steady. Decades of consistency add up. Here was the first twist they never saw coming. I wasn't broke. I just wasn't loud about my money. While my siblings spent freely, new cars, vacations, eating out, I'd lived simply, paid cash when I could. No flashy habits, no debt beyond a small credit card balance I paid off monthly. And then there was the inheritance from my aunt 2 years earlier. Not life-changing money, but enough to shift the math. I'd never told anyone about it. Not because I was hiding it, because no one asked. And I'd learned early not to volunteer information that would only change how I was treated. The attorney laid it out clearly. If I wanted to make an offer through the proper channels, I could. Quietly, legally, cleanly. So I did. While my parents packed boxes and talked about downsizing, I signed documents. While my mother planned new drapes for a condo near my sister, I wired funds. While my father avoided eye contact at dinner, I finalized inspections. The sale went through without a hitch. To them, it was just another transaction. To me, it was closure in motion. The night of that infamous dinner, when my mother told me I had 30 days, I already knew the truth. I knew where the paperwork stood. I knew what was coming. That was the small twist in that moment. They thought they were dropping a bomb. I was already standing in the fallout. When they left the next morning, the house felt enormous. Not empty. Exposed. Like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. For the first week, I didn't change much. Same routine, same grocery store, same mug of coffee in the morning. I wanted to sit with the reality of it. I wanted to be sure I wasn't acting out of spite. Then I started making the space mine. I replaced the sagging couch with a firm one that didn't swallow you whole. I bought a new mattress because my back deserved it. I framed photos I actually liked instead of the staged family portraits where I always stood at the edge. Each change felt small, but together they rewrote the atmosphere. 6 months passed. Quietly. No calls, no check-ins, no curiosity about whether I'd landed on my feet. That silence told me more than any argument ever could. Then came the text. Why are you still there? I stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I knew exactly what would happen next. An hour later, another message. Then a missed call. The old anxiety tried to creep back in. That familiar urge to explain myself, to smooth things over. I didn't. That Saturday morning, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The sound was unmistakable. My parents' car. Same engine noise. Same impatient door slam. I took my time answering the door. Not out of spite, out of respect for myself. When I opened it, the expressions on their faces shifted instantly. Confusion first. Then calculation. The living room didn't look abandoned. It looked lived in. Comfortable. Intentional. My mother stepped inside without asking. She always did. Her eyes scanned the space, taking inventory. My father hovered behind her, hands in his jacket pockets. My siblings followed, quieter than usual. "This doesn't make sense," my mother said. "What's going on?" I gestured to the chairs. "Sit." They did. "You're in my house," I said evenly. The words landed hard. My mother laughed once, sharp and brittle. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not." The room went still. Even the old clock on the wall seemed louder, I explained simply. No bragging. No revenge speech. Just facts. I'd seen the listing. I'd made arrangements. I'd purchased the property legally. "You bought it from us?" my father asked. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Yes." My sister crossed her arms. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" I met her eyes. "You didn't tell me you were selling." That was the second twist. They weren't angry because I owned the house. They were angry because I'd done it without their permission. The conversation shifted quickly. From disbelief to bargaining. From accusation to guilt. My mother's tone softened. She talked about expenses, about how the new place cost more than expected, about how family helps family. I listened, really listened. Then I asked one question. "If you had known I could do this, would you have treated me differently?" No one answered. That silence was everything. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. My hands didn't shake. My voice stayed calm. "It's time for you to go." They left the way they'd arrived. Slowly, quietly, without saying much. Afterward, I locked the door and leaned against it. Not in triumph, in relief. For weeks, the calls came. Apologies mixed with excuses. Requests disguised as concern. I answered none of them. Here was the major twist they never expected. I wasn't cutting them off out of anger. I was choosing peace. That decision, steady, deliberate, unremarkable on the surface, was the most powerful thing I'd ever done. After they left that day, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt settled. Like a lake after a storm finally stops pretending it isn't tired. Life didn't turn perfect overnight. I still paid property taxes, still worried about medical bills, still watched the news every evening with a cup of decaf coffee and wondered where the country was heading. But something fundamental had changed. I no longer lived waiting for approval from people who only valued me when it was convenient. Over time, the messages slowed. Apologies turned into silence. Silence turned into distance. And distance turned into clarity. Here's the uncomfortable truth people don't like to talk about. Some families don't break because of one big argument. They break because of years of quiet decisions about who matters and who doesn't. Was I wrong for not helping them financially? That's the ethical question I sat with the longest. But fairness isn't about blood. Integrity isn't about guilt. It's about consistency. They taught me I was on my own. I simply believed them. Walking away wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was boundaries, late in life, but finally firm. And if this story sounds familiar, ask yourself this. Is loyalty still loyalty when it only flows one way? If family ever pushed you aside and told you to figure it out, you're not alone. Share where you're listening from and what you think is fair.